Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Hurdy Burt Internet Broadcast Network, and we are on podcast number, I believe, 9, maybe? Yeah, number 10. For you folks listening in for the first time, we have a Facebook group called Power Hour Broadcast Danny L. Smith. I recommend you go over and join it. It's public, and you can catch up on all the podcasts we've done. Powerful podcast about personal growth and business. Anyhow, guys, Danny's a John Maxwell certified coach, and he's going to enlighten us tonight. We're still continuing our discussion about givers and takers with the book by Adam Grant. So, Danny, take it away.
Hey, Hurdy, thanks. By the way,
you're welcome.
I've been accused of. I don't know why I've been accused, but it has been pointed out to me in an accusing way that people hang around me too much and they start slurring their words and stuttering. So.
It's a gross broadcast. What can I tell you?
No, it's a gross broadcast. Yeah.
Not gross. Gross.
Yep. Well,
we talked last week. Just had to have some fun.
Yep. We talked last week about Adam Grant's book, Give and Take. We're going to go into that some more, maybe a little bit different style, or not maybe, it is. I actually have spoke to 3 groups of people in the past 2 weeks about this whole thing around giving and taking, and what Adam Grant has found in his studies over the years. Now, he's a Wharton Business School professor, does his research, and his research says that 30% of successful people, the top 30% of successful people are givers, but so are the bottom 30%. The middle group are matchers and takers. So what's the difference? Why are givers the least successful, and why are they the most successful? And this is across all lines of work here in the United States. It includes small business people, big business people, accountants inside of offices, attorneys, doctors, nurses, salespeople, engineers. This is literally across all walks of life. Teachers, and he gives numerous case studies. He didn't call it a case study, but people that he's tracked, has interviewed people that know these people. He's had companies participate in his assessments and in his surveys. So what's the difference between a person that is successful giving and a person that's not successful giving? What is it about the takers? He points out in his book that you can pick out takers in a crowd. You can follow people on Facebook and find the takers. You can find the givers. So one thing I found is an interview that he did with Daniel Pink. Now, Daniel Pink, won't go into who he is, but he's written quite a few books, including To Sell Is Human, Drive, The Whole Mind, very well thought of author, promoted very heavily in the Fortune 500 world. So here's some questions. I'm just going to kind of read through. Hurdy, stop me anytime you want to.
Okay.
I mean, what Grant's book does, it looks at the evidence from these findings that he came across in his business school studies. And, you know, those guys at those levels, they do all this research. But it really starts looking at and giving advice on how we become either givers or better givers, how we can, this is the big one, is how we shy away from the pure takers. And now anybody listening to this that's in my inner circle, you know, which is somebody that I consider people in my inner circle that if I run across you, have interaction with you at least once a week, you're in my inner circle. Obviously, some people are in a closer inner circle, but you know, anybody listen to that, just because if I'm sharing information doesn't mean you have to share information back or share with me, and if this is not tit for tat. And one thing this book has done, Hurdy, is make me realize it can't be tit for tat. There's a quote that I put out on social media. It's on my blog. I talked about it maybe last week. I opened up the talk at CBLG on Friday with the quote that if you're always concerned about, and I'll have it in front of me, so I'm going to mess it up a little bit, but if you're always concerned about tit for tat, your network is going to be much, much, much smaller. Now, I've called up a few people, Hurdy, that you and I know, and asked, what do you think about this quote? And the common answer is don't like it, which I agree. Don't like it, okay? Is that? But I think sometimes we start becoming selfish over a period of time. But there are times we do need to become selfish. But there's also, but we can go too far with our selfishness. So here's one of the questions that Pink asked Grant. One concern that some people have about being givers is that they'll be taken advantage of, or that they'll become poster children for the old adage, no good deed goes unpunished.
I'm glad you're doing it too.
So what are the few ways that successful givers avoid these traps? And good question, huh?
Great question.
So I'm just going to kind of read and add a little bit here, but Grant comes back with one successful, powerful strategy is to assess the generosity of the people you're helping. If they're consistently operating selfishly, like takers, it may be wise to shift from giving to matching. I enjoyed seeing that.
That's good.
Because, you know, coming through the book, I first listened to the book a couple of months ago over a period of a few Saturday mornings walking, and really did not intend to do any more with it. Oh, by the way, I think I said last week I wasn't sure where I heard about this book. I thought maybe it was from Michael Mayer's book, The 7 Levels of Communication. It was not. It was from John Maxwell's book, No Limits, and we were talking about capacity. And it was in that book, and I was going through that book the other night and looking at some of my notes and highlights, and ran across where he was talking about this give and take and raising your capacity. I forget which of the 12 areas of capacity that Maxwell was talking about. But, you know, that's it. But what he says here, again, is that to avoid the trap of people taking advantage of you, being such a giver, you're a heavy giver, and especially if you're a giver and you feel that you're in the bottom third, of most successful people, of being successful, he says again, is the shift from giving to matching. You quit giving to that person until they start matching. You don't overall quit giving, though. You don't change your philosophy. Instead of assisting them without any strings attached, help them on the condition that they pay it back to you, or you pay it forward to benefit someone else. Kind of flows over, kind of gives me a little bit of a weird feeling about flowing over too much into a matcher area. The second approach is to set boundaries for helping time versus personal productivity. A third option is to develop giving networks, bringing together groups of people to make and grant requests in a meeting or a listserv. By making giving visible, taking is discouraged, and marketplace often emerges that connects people with those who are best suited to help them.
Right.
So,
good point.
There's an example that I'm making myself a note to come back and post on something called the reciprocity ring. I remember reading that in the book. So moving on from this, but that if somebody's listening to this and you're concerned about being too much of a giver, and if you're not a giver now, that's probably the first thing you're going to think about. Well, I mean, I start giving, and then I can't afford to just give. And some of us can't. I can't give a mortgage, but I can give my time in around leadership and marketing.
Right.
And it doesn't take much time to do that. Okay, it's I mean, you can't give away very many free video edits, Purdy, without it starting to eat into your time.
Exactly.
I was on a training call listening to a guy today during lunch, and he's going through these. It's about productivity, and he's saying he's talking to a bunch of mortgage loan officers, which I'm one, and he said he's asking some questions, and one of them was, do you run personal errands between 8 and 5 every day? And if you do, stop it. It's hurting your productivity. So in Grant's book, to that point, I rarely do personal errands during the workday. Just don't do it. What I do is I do them all at the same time, one evening or on the weekend or something like that. To that point, what Grant says is that you can even do your giving in chunks. Just take a certain afternoon, take a Saturday, take a weekend, and do it. So I guess it's part of that is what it is that you're doing, and what it is that you're giving. Another question. Many of us know that the strength of weak ties. Know about the strength of weak ties. We've got ties to people, but they're weak. He says in your book you introduced the idea of dormant ties, which I found quite compelling. Can you explain what dormant ties are and why they matter to givers? Now, this was not in any of the summaries. I don't think it's any of the summary that I've done of the book. He says, dormant ties are connections to people you used to know but have fallen out of touch for several years or more. In a series of fascinating studies, Daniel Levin, George Walker, and Keith, you mentioned these three guys, have shown that dormant ties actually provide more valuable advice than current ties. Dormant ties tend to be more helpful than weak ties because there's a residue of trust and familiarity that makes it easier to reach out. But they also offer more novel information about strong ties. as they've encountered new people, ideas in the time since you last connected. He says, from my perspective, givers have the most to gain from reactivating dormant ties as they've built up a track record of generosity. If they can overcome the reluctance to seek help, there's a reservoir of goodwill waiting to be assessed. That last sentence, if they can overcome the reluctance to seek help. Point out again that many givers have a reluctancy to seek help. Now, let me go to the point about dormant ties. You know Gary Seal, heard he? Gary, yep. When he got started in the mortgage business, he started going through his database. People that he knew, people that knew him, and reaching out to them. You know, the first 3 loans, maybe just 2, the third one might have, no, I think the third one came from somebody he knew in his neighborhood. Yes. Okay, the first 3 loans that he did came from, I'm going to say old ties. Don't know how dormant they were because Gary does send out a regular newsletter. Don't know if they were on his newsletter or not, but they came from old ties. And it's just I think it's significant here that we're reaching out and if I remember right, the script that he was using was pretty much that, hey, I'll let you know I've got in the mortgage business. Let me know if I can help you. Obviously, I'm being helped myself by any referrals you give me, something along those lines. So moving on here, but point out that givers are reluctant to seek help, yet there's a reservoir of goodwill waiting to be assessed. Number 3, this is Pink speaking. Okay, let me just get this out of the way. People named Dennis are almost twice as likely to become dentists as people with comparable popular names. What the heck is going on here, and why should we care? Now, in the book, you're wondering, what in the world are you talking about? In the book, doesn't make sense, does it? In the book, Adam pointed out that people with the name Dennis are twice as likely to become dentists as people with comparable popular names. So having said that, and why should we care? Here's where Adam Grant goes with this. And this is in an area that as you start paying attention, you will start becoming more aware of more stuff. Okay? You and I have talked about it before.
Yeah.
Series of Lunch and Learns that I was doing about 3 years ago, and I think it was in the choices lessons that I was giving, the 13 choices, that I pointed out that a person that makes $50,000 a year thinks differently than the person making $50,000 a month. Remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, that'd blow your skirt up. It is, but as you become more aware of this giver and taker thing, for some reason, this matters. So here we go. This is, what's his name? Adam Grant's answer. The evidence here is very controversial, but it does turn out that we're surprisingly drawn to careers, people, places, and products that remind us of our own names. If your name is Dennis or Denise, when you first learn about dentist, you might have a slightly more positive feeling because it taps into something familiar that's part of your own identity. Research, and he names the name here, suggests that this is true for a wide range of names, especially if our names are rare and we identify strongly with them. The self-familiarity effect extends to helping. We're more likely to give time and money to people who remind us of ourselves. So he's pointing out some things, the dentist thing, that we start helping people that remind people of ourselves, and we can fall into a trap.
Yeah, for the wrong reason.
He says, yeah. He says, I go into more detail in chapter 8 of the book, and I think we should care for two reasons. First, subtle factors can shape where we direct our giving, and we need to be cautious about helping for the wrong reasons. Second, if we want to convince other people to be more generous, we can often boost giving by showing them they share uncommon commonalities with others in need.
Wow.
Pretty deep book.
I never thought of that, so I guess that's why I have a problem, because my name's Hurdy. Go ahead. You can't throw that in.
Yeah. What do you relate to, Hurdy?
That's a good question.
That'd be the key right there.
Right.
4. Now let me toss an odd word at you. Karma. Does your work offer some empirical support for the mystical idea often found in the religions of South Asia that our actions have repercussions, good or bad, that extend beyond the present moment in the rest of our lives? That's Pink's asking a question about this. I don't remember any of this in the book, but here we go to the answer. This is a really interesting way of framing my work. I do think there's a case to be made for science behind karma, rather contributing it to mystical forces. I believe matchers are behind many of the karmic moments in my life. If you're a matcher, you tend to believe strongly in a just world. You think what goes around ought to come around. That means you're motivated to punish takers for self-serving actions, and you're equally driven to reward givers for acting generously.
That's a pretty vicious circle to be in.
Boy, man, you wear yourself out in either one of those circles. Man, those circles collide, don't they?
So what if you change that? What if you change that word from karma to, now let me toss an odd word at you, choices? You know, isn't that the more realistic word? But I think he's trying to show what karma means in a matcher standpoint, right? That's all he's trying to make a point about.
Yeah, he's just saying, you know, that it's kind of like what goes around. What he said, what goes around comes around. I make a choice to help somebody, and I'm working my. I remember when I was on the wholesale side of the mortgage business. I was office here in Austin, but my territory included Houston and San Antonio. And I'd go be working my tail off over in Houston. And then business shows up from San Antonio. But I think that's, in one sense, what happens with the giver, the successful giver, the giver that is in the top third, as we pointed out last week, is that
cares
that
about
giver
people and cares about profits. Right.
Yeah, he cares about people and profit. He's ambitious. He or she's ambitious. He is aware of what's going on. Is aware of his giving, the people he's giving to, and enjoys the giving, and is going to continue to give. But he's also paying attention, and he's not letting himself get sucked into a rut. So. The successful giver in the business is going to come from elsewhere. He says so. So anyway, on to number 5.
Okay.
Most people, this is Pink talking to Grant again, most people you found are matchers. And that presumably includes most people reading this interview. What is one step that Pink Blog readers, that's the name of his blog, Pink Blog readers can take today to move a little more in the direction of becoming givers? He said, Grant says, I think changing your style starts with seeking self-awareness. Do other people see you as a giver, taker, or matcher? And and he points out you can go to www.giveandtake.com. There's a free assessment where you can rate yourself and ask other people to evaluate you anonymously. If you decide to shift in the giver direction, my favorite strategy is what one of America's top networkers calls the 5-minute favor. The key is look for ways to help others that are relatively low cost to you. It might be making an introduction between two people who can benefit from knowing each other, sharing an interesting article, or offering to provide advice or feedback. If you choose a form of helping that you find enjoyable and meaningful, it might even boost your mood and energy. And, that's something that I enjoy practicing. I just had met for coffee, hence AKA 1-to-1, with Eric Vaughn. I'm not going to pronounce the rest of the last name. He primarily goes by Vaughn. He's a design guy, and was able to recommend him to look at a couple of websites to see if there might be some a fit there for him. I sent an email to a guy to check if he was still needing some assistance in Eric's wheelhouse, and sent an email to another guy asking that guy's name that I met. So that, when you do these one-to-ones, when you're networking, and if you're asking people about them, and if you're thinking about them and not what you want to say next. Now, I call this more of a coaching type approach. I'm talking about coaching in the truest sense of coaching, where you're only asking questions of the person being coached. Then it triggers things in our subconscious. Most of us don't give referrals because we don't know how to reach into a subconscious to think about people that they might need to meet or want to meet.
Yep.
Like for me, as a mortgage loan officer, people are always trying to connect me with realtors. I don't want to be connected with realtors. Realtors don't want to be connected with a loan officer. The average realtor that answers their phone to a number they don't know. Well, let me say the average realtor, whether they answer their phone or not, is getting 120 to 150 calls a day. I'm sorry, a week. Wait a minute. Back up. A month from mortgage loan officers simply who are calling asking for business that they've never met before. 120, 150 a month.
That's crazy.
So that's why many of them don't answer the phone. And so it's back to the give and take thing. But with the give and take, learning to be a better giver. I mean, that one-to-one I had a while ago, I worked on those connections right there in front of Eric. I said, hold on a second, Eric, let me find out what this guy's name is that has to do with photography, matted pictures, printing, which is a business Eric just sold. He was on a B2C side, and this is on a B2B. So I texted a guy about that. I emailed somebody that reached out for my advice about 60 days ago to see if he's still needing some help in that area. So that I didn't take it. I was there for that period of time with Eric, a little over an hour. It was just part of that time. I do have one follow-up, but every good one-to-one has follow-up, right? Follow-through. Yep. So these questions, and this guy that one of America's top networkers, forget the man's name, it's in the book, but he is, LinkedIn considers him one of the, LinkedIn, I didn't know it till reading the book, but LinkedIn ranks people in different ways. And they have a networking where they're ranking people, not just on their connections, but their interaction and what they're doing offline. And this guy was ranked, I think, in 2012 as America's #1 networker.
Wow, cool.
All right. Well, that's the lesson, the talk for the day.